I guess I should start by introducing myself. My name is Alex, and I'm 37 years old. For the past 5 years, I had been in a relationship with Sarah, a woman I thought was the love of my life. We met at a mutual friend's party and hit it off immediately. She was 29, smart, driven, funny, and, in every way, the perfect match for me. We had similar values, the same ideas about family, and the same future goals. We talked about marriage, kids, and what our life would look like together. From the outside, we seemed like the perfect couple. On paper, it was a relationship that everyone would envy. We were in sync, we loved each other, and everything was going so well. But things didn't always look that perfect behind closed doors. You see, Sarah had a dream. She had always wanted to become a doctor. But for years, she had been stuck in a desk job that barely paid the bills. Despite being incredibly intelligent, she felt stuck, suffocated, and miserable in her career. I understood that. I wanted to support her, to be the person who would encourage her to go after her dream. One day, she came to me, almost in tears, telling me that she couldn't stand her job any longer. "I want to quit, Alex," she said. "I want to go back to school and become a doctor." I could see the fire in her eyes. She was passionate and determined, and she wanted it so badly. And despite all the risks and challenges, I made a decision then and there to support her fully. I told her to go for it. I had no doubts about her capabilities. I had faith in her. What followed was an immense change in our lives. I didn't hesitate to take on more work, to cover all the financial responsibilities, and to make sure Sarah could focus solely on her studies. I knew it was a huge sacrifice for me, working long hours, taking on the load of paying for rent, groceries, utilities, and of course her tuition, but I didn't mind. I loved her. I knew that it was a temporary situation. Once she achieved her dream, everything would be worth it. I started to feel like I was living two lives, one where I was the supportive boyfriend, sacrificing for her success, and another where I started to feel a little resentful. But I didn't show that to Sarah. I kept it to myself, believing in her potential and thinking it would all be worth it in the end. I wanted her to succeed. I wanted her to be happy. But somewhere along the way, I began to lose a part of myself. Every day, I would wake up, go to work, come home, and take care of everything else. Sarah would be studying, or at school, or doing something related to her dream. I never complained, at least not to her, but inside, I started to feel stretched thin. I was constantly tired, constantly working, and I felt like I was losing sight of my own dreams. I didn't talk about it because I thought it was temporary. I thought that once Sarah became a doctor, our lives would change. She would get a good job, we'd settle down, and we'd be happy. That's how it was supposed to go, right? But as Sarah's studies progressed, something started to change in her. It was subtle at first. She became more distant. She would spend long hours studying and would often go out with friends or classmates, and I noticed she didn't share as much with me anymore. I tried to be understanding. After all, she was going through a lot. Medical school was intense, and she was under a lot of pressure. But things kept shifting. Her texts became shorter. Our conversations felt strained. And then there were the nights when she told me she was going to the library to study, but I could never quite shake the feeling that she wasn't where she said she would be. There were times when she wouldn't come home until late, and I'd just lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if everything was still okay between us. Then it happened. One evening, I was sitting in the living room, working on my laptop, when I overheard her on the phone. Her voice was soft, but I could tell she was laughing. She was talking to someone who wasn't me. The conversation was lighthearted and playful, in a way that made my stomach tighten. I couldn't make out everything she said, but I distinctly heard her call the other person by name. It wasn't a friend of hers that I recognized. Something inside me snapped. I had been so blind, so trusting, so caught up in helping Sarah achieve her dream that I hadn't seen the signs. I started to question everything. Was she cheating on me? It seemed crazy, but at that moment, it felt like the only explanation. I tried to ignore it. I wanted to trust her, wanted to believe that I was just overreacting, but my gut told me otherwise. I needed to know the truth, so I waited. I didn't confront her that night, but I made a decision to look deeper. I had to find out what was going on. The next day, I had a chance to borrow her phone. I didn't plan it, but it happened. I unlocked it, feeling a little guilty but also determined. What I found sent chills down my spine. There, in black and white, were the messages between Sarah and a guy named David, someone I had never heard of before. The texts were flirtatious, intimate, and way too personal for comfort. But the worst part, she had been sending them for months. It wasn't just one or two messages. It was an ongoing conversation. I felt the ground beneath me crumble. The realization hit me like a wave. She had been cheating on me. All the sacrifices, all the trust, all the support I had given her, it had all been a lie. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. I was angry. I was hurt. But most of all, I was devastated. I had given everything for her, and in return, she had betrayed me. I didn't know what to do. The man I thought I was had just shattered into pieces. How could I have been so blind? How could she do this to me? But I didn't want to make any rash decisions just yet. I needed more information. I needed to understand why, and most importantly, I needed to make her face the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to let this go without a fight. I was done being a good, understanding boyfriend. It was time for her to feel the weight of the betrayal she had caused. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept, and when I did, I tossed and turned, replaying everything in my mind. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The more I pieced things together, the more I realized how deep the lies went. It wasn't just the messages. It was the way she had acted around me, the secrecy, the distance. It had all been there, and I had missed every single sign. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played. All the times I had worked myself to the bone, supporting her, giving up so much of my own life to help her achieve her dream, it felt like it had been for nothing. And worse, I had let her walk all over me while I blindly trusted her. At first, I thought about confronting her right away, but I knew better. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. I needed to gather more information and make sure I knew exactly what was going on before I did anything. So, I kept my distance. I acted like everything was fine, even though my mind was racing with thoughts of betrayal. She continued to act normal, or at least what she thought was normal, around me. There were still nights when she'd be gone late, telling me she was studying. But now, I know the truth, and the truth was worse than I could have imagined. I had been with Sarah long enough to recognize when she was hiding something. Little things started to stand out more and more. The way she'd quickly change the subject when I asked her about her day, the way her phone was always on silent or face down when I was around. I used to think it was just a coincidence, that I was being paranoid, but now I knew it was all part of the game. I decided to dig deeper. One night, after dinner, she left the house to meet some friends from school. She told me it would be just a quick get-together, nothing serious. Something about it didn't sit right with me, so I waited. I watched as she walked out the door, pretending like everything was fine. The moment she left, I grabbed my coat and decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of myself. In fact, I hated that I was doing this. But my gut told me that I needed to see for myself. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to sit around anymore pretending like I didn't know what was going on. I followed her for miles. My heart was pounding in my chest as I watched her pull into a small, tucked-away cafe on the edge of town. She went inside, and I waited outside for a good while, sitting in my car, watching the clock tick away. Then, the worst thing happened. After about half an hour, a man walked out of the cafe. It was David, the same guy from the messages. They greeted each other with a hug. I could see Sarah's face light up, and for a moment, she didn't even seem to notice me. The way they interacted, it was too intimate. There was no doubt in my mind anymore. I stayed there, not wanting to make my presence known. I didn't need to confront them. Yet, I needed to process what I was seeing. I couldn't believe it was really happening. I had been right all along. Sarah had been seeing him behind my back for months. I stayed for a while longer, watching them say their goodbyes. Then I saw David kiss her cheek before he left, and that was the final straw. It was more than just an emotional affair. It was physical, and it had been going on for longer than I'd realized. I felt sick to my stomach. All the love, all the sacrifices, it had meant nothing to her. I had built my life around her, and in return, she had been building a secret life of her own. That night, I didn't go home right away. I needed to think. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the city lights, trying to figure out what my next move should be. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw everything in her face and demand answers. But deep down, I knew I couldn't do it like that. If I was going to confront her, I had to be calm and controlled. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. The next day, I didn't bring it up immediately. I was still processing everything, still in shock, but I couldn't let it slide. I had to confront her. I had to hear her side of the story. Even though I already knew what it would be, I needed to hear her try to explain herself, try to make me believe that she hadn't been lying to me all along. That evening, Sarah came home late, like she always did. She didn't even seem to notice anything was off. I had spent the entire day making sure everything was in place, gathering the evidence, organizing my thoughts. When she walked in, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. She greeted me with a casual, "Hey babe, what's up?" But I could see the nervous energy in her eyes. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I asked, "Where were you last night, Sarah? Who were you really with?" She looked taken aback, her expression faltering. "I told you, I was with friends." "Really?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Because I followed you last night. I saw you with David." Her face went pale. For a moment, she didn't say anything. I could see the panic setting in, but she tried to hold her composure. "Alex, listen, this isn't what you think." I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't want to. I already knew everything. What I wanted was to make her understand that she couldn't get away with this, that I wasn't going to stand by and let her tear me apart without consequences. "I've seen the messages, Sarah. I've seen everything," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You've been lying to me. You've been cheating on me." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I wasn't going to let her deny it anymore. "This is over," I said. "I'm done." Her face crumpled. The facade she had put up for months began to crack, and I could see the guilt written all over her face. But it didn't matter anymore. I had made my decision. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The truth hit me hard. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs, leaving nothing but a hollow, suffocating ache. I stared at her phone screen in disbelief. The messages between Sarah and David weren't just flirtatious. They were intimate, affectionate, and filled with things I had never heard her say to me, things I had thought were reserved for our relationship. I couldn't understand how it had all gone unnoticed, how I had been so blind to the signs. For hours, I sat in that chair, trying to make sense of it all. My mind was racing, looping in circles, bouncing between anger, heartbreak, and confusion. I didn't know what to feel first. Betrayed by the woman I loved, or furious at myself for not seeing the cracks sooner. It was like being hit by a truck and then being forced to watch it back in slow motion, each moment replaying with the knowledge of what was to come, but I couldn't stop it. I didn't confront her right away. As much as I wanted to scream, as much as I wanted to throw everything in her face, I knew I needed to keep calm. I needed to be strategic. If I was going to confront her, it would have to be on my terms, not out of some emotional outburst. I had to take control. The next few days were unbearable. I kept seeing her in the apartment, going about her usual routine, acting like nothing was wrong. She didn't know I had discovered everything, and I felt this strange disconnect every time she smiled at me or asked about my day. How could she be so casual when I knew the truth? I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick to my stomach. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She had been living this double life for months. She had taken everything I gave her, my love, my support, my sacrifices, and had thrown it all away for a man who clearly didn't care about her the way I did. That thought was like a fire in my chest, fueling the rage that simmered beneath the surface. I decided that I wouldn't let this go. If she thought she could get away with betraying me and everything we had built together, she was wrong. I didn't care how much I had to lose. She needed to face the consequences of her actions. The confrontation was inevitable. I had everything I needed. The messages, the proof, the painful truth that would force her to finally acknowledge what she had done. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I didn't want her to explain it away or make excuses. I wasn't interested in hearing how it was all a misunderstanding. I wanted her to face it, to look me in the eye, and own what she had done. That night, when she came home, I knew it was time. She walked in, greeted me like usual, and went straight to the kitchen. I stood in the living room, watching her move around the space we'd shared for so long, the place where we'd built our life together. Everything about it now felt tainted, corrupted. I waited a few moments before I spoke, my voice steady, but sharp. "Sarah, we need to talk." She froze, turning to face me. There was an immediate tension in the air, something different from the usual back and forth we had. I could see her eyes flicker with confusion, maybe even a hint of concern, but she didn't say anything. I pulled out her phone. "I know everything, Sarah. The messages, the calls, the lies. I've seen it all. You've been cheating on me for months." She went pale. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes darted around, like she was trying to find a way out of it, but there was no escape now. she started, her voice shaking, but she couldn't finish the sentence. She was caught, and I could see it in her face, the realization that there was no denying it anymore. I wasn't going to let her spin her story. How could you do this to me, Sarah? How could you take everything I gave you, everything I sacrificed, and throw it all away for some guy? I loved you. I supported you when no one else would. And this is how you repay me? The words came out harsh, filled with all the pain and betrayal I had been bottling up for days. I didn't care anymore about keeping my composure. I didn't care about being calm or understanding. She didn't deserve that from me anymore. She opened her mouth again, but this time, her voice broke. I never meant for it to go this far, Alex. It just happened. I wasn't happy, and I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know how to tell you. I let out a bitter laugh. Losing yourself? Are you serious? You think it was all about you? What about me, Sarah? What about everything we've been through together? Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I swear I didn't. But I couldn't stop myself. It wasn't just about him. It was about me needing something I didn't feel like I was getting in our relationship. I shook my head, disbelief mixing with disgust. You couldn't stop yourself. You really think I'm supposed to feel sorry for you? I didn't give her a chance to respond. The anger, the frustration, the years of sacrifices and love, it all came crashing down in that moment. I wasn't interested in hearing more excuses. I wasn't interested in anything she had to say anymore. You don't get to talk your way out of this, Sarah. You've already crossed the line. We're done. The finality in my voice hung in the air like a death sentence. She opened her mouth, as if she was going to plead, to beg for another chance, but I couldn't listen to it anymore. I couldn't let her twist the knife deeper. I'm done, I repeated, this time with even more conviction. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with the betrayal, and I'm done with you. She didn't say anything after that. She stood there, her face a mix of shock, guilt, and perhaps even a little relief. I didn't care. It was over. The worst part? I felt nothing but emptiness. As she stood there, looking at me with those tear-filled eyes, I realized something. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. Done with the lies. Done with the deceit. Done with the woman I had loved. The woman I had given everything for. And it felt strange, because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had reclaimed my life. I don't know if I'd ever felt this angry before. When Sarah walked out that night, her face red with frustration, part of me almost felt relieved, but mostly, I was still furious. She didn't even apologize. She didn't even seem to care that she had destroyed everything between us. She just walked out, like it was nothing, but I wasn't going to let it go that easily. I had always been the guy who put other people's needs first. I'd let my own life fade into the background for years, supporting Sarah, believing that the sacrifices were worth it because she was worth it. But now, I could see it for what it was. Manipulation. She had used me, taken everything I had to offer, and then tossed me aside without a second thought. But I wasn't going to just let her get away with it. I wasn't going to let her continue walking through life as if nothing had happened. I wasn't that guy anymore. I'd been humiliated, betrayed, and now I had a plan, and it was a plan that would make her pay. I started by going through everything I could find, her phone, her emails, her social media. She had no idea I was doing this, but I wasn't about to just sit around and hope she'd come clean. I had to dig deeper. I wanted to know everything. I knew that if I was going to make her regret what she'd done, I had to make sure I had all the facts straight. I found the messages between Sarah and David, the ones where she talked about how much she missed him, how much she needed him, the ones where she laughed about how easily she had manipulated me into paying for her education, her rent, her lifestyle, and there were even more, messages from other guys she had been talking to, each one more intimate than the last. It was like a betrayal on top of a betrayal. I took screenshots of everything and saved every conversation and every photo. It was time for me to make sure she couldn't run from this. She couldn't just move on and act like nothing had happened. The next thing I did was start gathering evidence of all the ways I had supported her, all the times I'd covered for her, all the sacrifices I'd made to keep her comfortable while she chased her dream of becoming a doctor. I made a list of everything I'd done for her, every check I had written, every bill I had paid. I even gathered the receipts from the textbooks I'd bought, the trips I'd paid for, and the nights I'd stayed up late helping her with her studies, all while she was running around behind my back. But it wasn't just about proving what she had done to me. It was about making sure that everyone knew what kind of person she really was. I wasn't going to let her keep her reputation, I had spent years building my life around her, and now it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. I started with social media. I wasn't going to hold back. I posted the screenshots of her messages with David, the ones where she insulted me, and made jokes about how much I was willing to do for her while she was out sleeping with other men. I even included some of the more intimate ones, the ones where she promised David that they'd be together after graduation, once she was free of me. The post went up late at night. I didn't want her to know it was coming. I wanted it to hit her when she least expected it, and when it did, it spread like wildfire. Her friends, her family, everyone who had once admired her, saw it. They saw her for who she really was. Her carefully crafted image as the sweet, ambitious student was shattered in an instant. People started commenting, asking her what was going on, calling her out on her behavior. Some of her friends tried to defend her at first, but it didn't take long for them to realize that the evidence was overwhelming. The lies she had told, the people she had hurt, it was all out there for the world to see. Then I went after her social circle. I contacted some of her professors, the ones who had praised her for her academic work, and sent them copies of the messages. I wanted them to know that the so-called dedicated student they admired was nothing but a fraud. I knew that if I played this right, it wouldn't just hurt her emotionally, it would hurt her professionally. It didn't take long for the rumors to start. Her classmates, who had once admired her, now whispered behind her back. She had built a reputation for being the girl who had it all together, the girl with big dreams and a bright future. But now, she was the girl who had cheated on her boyfriend, the girl who had used him to fund her life while she ran around behind his back. It spread through the university like wildfire, but I didn't stop there. I knew that in order to really get under her skin, I had to go after the person she had betrayed me for. David. I'd never liked him, but now, I had the perfect ammunition to take him down too. I found out more about him, his background, his job, his finances, and, like Sarah, I shared it all. I posted about his past, his debts, and his failed relationships. I even found out about his history with drugs and sent it to his boss, making sure his career took a hit, just like Sarah's was. If they wanted to ruin my life, I was going to make sure I ruined theirs too. By the time Sarah came home to see everything I had done, it was too late. Her life, both personally and professionally, was in ruins, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. She had made her bed. Now, it was time for her to lie in it. But the most satisfying part? Watching her try to salvage what was left of her life, her calls, her desperate texts, none of it moved me. I had nothing left for her. I had given her everything, and in return, she had taken everything from me. Now, I was going to take everything back. The revenge wasn't about getting her back. It was about showing her that I was done being her fool. And I was done with people like her. After everything that had happened, I thought I was done. I thought once I confronted her, exposed the truth, that everything would just end. But life, it seems, doesn't always play out like that. Mia wasn't done with me. She wasn't going to just let me go without putting up a fight. And in a way, I had to give her some credit for that. She tried. She really did. But no matter how hard she tried to twist things, I wasn't about to let her back into my life. It started a few days after the confrontation. I didn't think she'd have the nerve to come back. But there she was, standing on my doorstep, her eyes swollen from crying, looking like someone who had been through hell. I could barely look at her without feeling sick to my stomach. The audacity, the nerve she had to think she could walk back into my life after everything. But she did. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. I didn't even say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at her. She was trying to manipulate me again, trying to get me to soften up, to feel sorry for her. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I wasn't the fool who fell for her charm, who bought into the lies. I had been there, done that, and the t-shirt was now in the trash. "I'm listening," I finally said, keeping my voice as cold as possible. Her eyes flickered with a mix of relief and desperation. "I made a huge mistake, Alex. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. But this isn't who I am. You have to believe me." I wanted to laugh. "Is that what you think? That after everything, I'm just going to forgive you because you say sorry? Do you really think I'm that stupid?" Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she took a step forward. No, I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know it wasn't about you. It was about me, about how lost I felt. You weren't giving me the attention I needed, and I just made a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far." She was trying to justify everything, trying to make it sound like it was all just some temporary lapse in judgment. But I saw through it. I had seen it all before. The excuses, the promises of change. I wasn't buying it this time. I don't want to hear it, I said, shaking my head. You don't get to lie to me like this anymore. You don't get to twist everything to make yourself look like the victim. You chose this, Mia. You chose to betray me. You chose to disrespect everything I did for you. And now, you want to play the victim? Tears welled up in her eyes. Please, Alex. Please don't leave me. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make it right. I'll prove to you that I can be the woman you need. I shook my head again, feeling a cold bitterness rise in my chest. There's nothing you can do, Mia. It's too late for that. You burned all your bridges. You lied, you cheated, and now you want to waltz back into my life like nothing happened? No, I'm done. She started to cry harder, her sobs shaking her whole body. Please don't do this. You can't just throw away everything we had. I love you. Her words stung, but not in the way they once would have. This time, it felt empty. I couldn't believe her anymore. I couldn't look at her without seeing the lies, without remembering everything she'd done. It was like a switch had been flipped, and the love I once had for her was gone, replaced with something I could barely even name. Disgust, anger, disappointment, all of the above. I don't love you anymore, Mia, I said firmly, each word like a weight off my chest. You don't get to pull me back into this toxic mess. I've had enough. You've taken enough from me. I watched as her face fell, the realization sinking in. She had lost me, and this time, there was no coming back. I wasn't going to cave in. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. But even as I said those words, a small part of me felt bad. I could see the pain in her eyes, the desperation. She was broken, and I knew I had played a part in that. The guilt I had carried for months, the guilt of not noticing the cracks, of not being the perfect partner, was now mingling with something else. I was relieved to be free, but I also hated that I had to destroy her to do it. Still, I pushed the feeling down. I couldn't feel sorry for her anymore, not when she had done this to me. I'm done, Mia. Please leave. It was the final blow. She stood there for a moment longer, as if expecting me to say something else, to offer some kind of hope, but I didn't. I couldn't. I had nothing left to give her. She turned away, walking down the stairs without another word. I watched her go, the weight of the decision settling deep in my bones. She didn't come back that night, or the next. She didn't call, or try to send any more messages. It was as if the chapter of our relationship had finally closed, and I wasn't sure if I felt relief or sadness. I only knew one thing for sure. I was done, and so, as the days passed, I began to pick up the pieces of my life. I focused on work, on my friends, and on things that had been put on hold for so long. I took back control. It wasn't easy. I still thought about her sometimes, about the good times we had, about the love I thought we shared, but I knew deep down that it was better this way. Mia had lost me, and now she would have to live with the consequences of her choices. It had been a few months since I completely cut off Mia. Things had settled down, but the echoes of what had happened between us still lingered in the background of my life. I'd rebuilt, or at least I was trying to. I'd learned that no matter how much we want to hold on to the past, some things are meant to be let go. Mia was one of those things, but no matter how much I wanted to move on, I knew deep down that there would always be a part of me that would feel the weight of her betrayal. Then, one day, as I was just getting home from work, I saw her standing there, Mia, outside my apartment building. It looked like she had been waiting for hours. I froze. She looked different, worn out, tired, almost as if she had aged overnight. But the sight of her didn't stir the same feelings I once had. In fact, I was numb. She was clutching something in her hands, her voice shaky when she finally spoke. I need to talk to you, she said, her eyes pleading. I didn't invite her in. I just stood there in the doorway, listening to her words. She quickly went into what seemed like a rehearsed speech, telling me she'd made mistakes, how sorry she was, how she had changed. But the words felt hollow, like they had no weight behind them. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just exhausted by the thought of it all. Then, she dropped the bombshell. I'm pregnant, she said softly. It's yours. For a second, I didn't know how to react. My mind raced. Could it be true? Was this her attempt to reel me back in? To make me feel responsible for something I didn't even know if I could trust? She was desperate, but I wasn't going to fall for it again. I don't believe you, I said flatly. Get a DNA test. I could see the change in her eyes. Something shifted in her. The facade started to crack, and in that moment, I realized she wasn't really trying to fix things. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was just trying to manipulate me again, to use a child as a way to worm her way back into my life. We agreed to a paternity test. The results came in a few days later, and as I had suspected, the baby wasn't mine. The shock in Mia's face when the doctor handed her the envelope said it all. She could barely hold herself together. I felt a strange sense of closure in that moment. The final string tying me to her had been severed. It wasn't my child, and I wasn't going to let her use that lie as a reason to drag me back into her chaos. Mia tried to apologize again, tried to explain, but I wasn't interested in her words anymore. There was no redemption for what she had done. No second chances. I told her to leave and never contact me again. I didn't need her. I didn't need the lies or the manipulation. I had learned the hard way that loving someone doesn't mean they're good for you. After Mia left, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. It wasn't the kind of peace you get when you've been through a battle and survived. No, it was the quiet after the storm, the relief that came from knowing I had finally let go of something that was never truly mine to hold on to. It wasn't easy. Letting go of someone you love, or thought you loved, is never simple. But with Mia, I realized that sometimes the only way to truly love yourself is to walk away from toxic relationships. I had spent years giving and sacrificing for someone who would never appreciate it. Now, it was time to rebuild my life, not around her, but around what I needed. The weeks that followed were focused on me. I worked harder at my job, spent more time with friends who truly cared, and even took up a hobby I'd forgotten I loved, photography. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. I wasn't weighed down by the past anymore, and even though I didn't know what the future would hold, I was starting to look forward to it. It's funny how life works, isn't it? We go through these deep, painful experiences and think we'll never be able to move on, but in the end, they make us stronger, wiser, and more aware of what we truly deserve. And now, I knew I deserved better. Mia would always be a chapter in my life, one I'd never forget, but she was no longer my story. I had closed that book, and as I moved forward, I realized the greatest revenge was not in tearing her down. It was in building myself up,